Good morning. Happy Monday. Let me get this microphone closer to me so you can hear me. I'm Greg, and this is the Daily Bible Wrap Up. I'm very happy that you're here. This is where I go through the readings, reading the Bible in 1 year. The reading plan is in the show notes down below. You can also see what we're reading right here in the crayon. The general idea is that I've taken notes for several years, and I thought that last year around March or May, I think it was, I started sharing it as a audio only podcast, and it became a video podcast. Before I get started in today's readings, is what I did yesterday, and I'll do this periodically for the next couple of months. If you have an interesting, or if you have a story of how your faith impacts your career in cyber or in technology, I'd like to talk to you. You can give me drop me an email at greg.schaefer@secondchancebook.org, thinking about some sort of a different project. And right now it's just in the genesis, no pun intended. I think I used that pun yesterday, so maybe pun intended. But there's an idea, and wanted to see if there's interest for something. Today's readings: Psalm 124, Hebrews 11, 17 through 40, and Ezekiel 24 through 25. So starting with Psalm 125, very short psalm. It's a what-if psalm. Quote verse, what if the Lord had not been on our side? I think the analogy here is what if the Lord had removed his protection? This goes back to the realization that if we reject God enough times, he will remove that protection as a last effort to teach obedience. There will always be some whose arrogance will never allow them to understand that obedience does not sacrifice freedom. We are not meant to live our lives alone, both among us, here, living creatures in time, and with God. New Testament, Hebrews 11, we're in verse 17 is where we start. This continues examples of faith. I'm going to read through several of these. Abraham willing to sacrifice Isaac. Isaac blessing Jacob and Esau. Jacob blessing Joseph's sons, though I would have thought that the greater blessing was for Joseph and his brothers, since Joseph and his brothers are the root of the 12 tribes. Joseph's confidence that one day the people will leave Egypt, Moses' parents hiding him as an infant, then Moses sharing the oppression of God's people, despite having grown up in Egyptian affluence. Remember, he didn't have to live life as a Jew. Quote verse 26, he thought it was better to suffer for the sake of Christ than to his own treasures of Egypt. Geography lesson there, Greg. Now, this statement for the Hebrews ties Christ with God. I thought that was interesting, that the specific, he thought it was better to suffer for the sake of Christ than to his own treasures of Egypt. More faith items: Moses leading the people out of Egypt with Joseph's bones, Moses commanding the people to keep the Passover, navigating through the parted Red Sea on dry ground, the marching that led to the walls of Jericho falling, Rahab saving the spies. The author then says that they can go on with other faith examples. Quote verse 39, all these people earned a good reputation because of their faith, yet none of them received all that God had promised. For God had something better in mind for us so that they would not reach perfection without us. Old Testament, Ezekiel 24, specific date, January 15th, 588 BC is when this message was received by Ezekiel. On this date, the king of Babylon is beginning his attack on Jerusalem. The message: one image of boiling meat. No piece is better than the other. The boiling pot appears to be the sorrow awaiting Jerusalem. The corruption cannot be cleaned from the pot, so it, or Jerusalem, is to be discarded in the fire. It's verse 12. Then Ezekiel receives a personally devastating message: the death of his wife. His dearest treasure is about to happen, and it does. But when it does, he's not to show mourning. The people are to do as he did when calamity comes. Do not mourn in public. And I feel like I missed a reading here. Did I miss Ezekiel 25? I think I did. So we'll pick up Ezekiel 25 tomorrow, and that's it for today. My prayer for you is that you live today as if the King is coming back today. Take care.